Well, I think growing up in Zanzibar, which is in a way a concentrated cosmopolitan society.
This series of presentation is part of the Awakening Project.
And at that time, then I joined here. It was government Indian Junior.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Welcome to the fourth panel discussion of the Awakening Project of the Khoja Shia International Muslim Community. Awakening Project is a grassroots-led project that looks at challenges facing the community and how our foundational institution of family, madrasa, and member can overcome these challenges. You will find more information on the Awakening Project of Khoja Shia International Muslim Community website and various YouTube presentations. By the grace of God, the Awakening Project of Khoja Shia International Muslim Community has reached a 10-year milestone. One of its current ongoing projects is to have candid panel discussions on institutional workings, whether the institutional is fit for the purpose, or do we need changes to make it work. In this panel discussion, I would like to shift the focus of my conversations to the role of councillors and leaders of the World Federation. Historically, the World Federation is a global organization uniting the global Khoja Shia International communities under a rule-based hierarchical structure, Jamaat, Regional Federation, and World Federation, based on geography. In terms of history, it has existed for almost 46 years, compared to, say, Africa Federation, a regional body that has existed for almost 76 years, compared to Jamaat, that has survived over 130 years since the formation of our first Jamaat in Zanzibar. In the informatized and digitized era, where communication is fast and effective, where facilities to connect is in real time, is a hierarchical form of a structure with its inherent bureaucracy based on geography outdated, or does it still has relevance? More of our grassroots membership do relate more to their own Jamaat and have some sense of ownership, whilst they have broken or non-existent connection or relevance with regional federation or World Federation. Is this statement that I've just made an assertion or an assumption or real? We will try and factor these questions and many others in our panel discussion today. So, to discuss these and other important matters relating to our global communities this evening, this evening in Australia, and I think early morning in Toronto, I have with us a panel of 3 councillors who are or were representing their respective region at the World Federation level. Welcome all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for taking time to participate in this panel discussion. I will be introducing each of you, and really I'm grateful to all of you for your time. The fundamental purpose of this panel is for you all to share your experience of your journey of representation and participation in the World Federation so far, the intellectual and social challenges you see affecting our communities and societies, and your thoughts and solutions as to how we may overcome them. In a way, a panel discussion of this nature, I believe, will make our viewers think critically about how we should evolve our community to a better level. So in our panel today, we have Saeeda Jiwa. Saeeda Jiwa was born in Dar es Salaam. She completed her primary and secondary education in Islamabad, Pakistan. After marriage, she moved to the UK in 1985. She began her community involvement by becoming a volunteer in her local jamaat in 1995. Soon after, she rose to become the vice chair lady of Husseini Madrasa. She became a vice chair lady of, is that correct, Husseini Madrasa deputy, Saeeda?
Yes, I was the vice chair lady in the Jamaat, in the ladies section.
Right, okay. And then you became a deputy of Husseini Madrasa and then the principal of Husseini Madrasa.
And then I became a chair lady until 2000. And then I joined Madrasa as a deputy and became a Madrasa principal for both gents and ladies in 2003 to 2005.
Very nice, okay. Thank you very much for that. And then her involvement in the European Jamaat Federation began as a chair of Khawateen Board from 2000 to 2007, and then she became a European Jamaat councillor from 2007 to 2009, and subsequently elected to the position of World Federation councillor for 3 terms from 2009 until 2021. And during this time, she undertook needs assessment for women globally and continued to liaise as a regional rep. Her career as a qualified social worker also spans various responsibilities relating to safeguarding and social work. As such, she has contributed to the Independent Inquiry Panel on Safeguarding Matters Relating to the Community, as well as independent panel members for fostering an adoption panel for Children's Trust in Northamptonshire, and was a service manager for children in care and asylum seekers' children. We also have Alhaji Hussein by Hussein from Australia. He was born in Tanga. His early childhood was spent there, then a couple of years in Dubai, and then back in Dar es Salaam to do his O levels and A levels. He began his community work during O levels when he ran the Madrasa library for a couple of years with his best friends. He completed his chartered professional accounting studies in Nairobi and worked for KPMG Dar es Salaam. After marriage, he moved to Australia in 2005 and began his career at Deloitte, becoming the first ever Muslim partner in 2009. Currently, he's leading assurance practice unit in Asia Pacific. His expertise extend to derivatives, risk management, valuation, and accounting. In Australia, he contributed his time to Khoja community through his various roles at Imam Hassan Center in Sydney and at the Federation of Australasian Communities Incorporated. His community service privileges include being a teacher at Madrasa for over 10 years, a role he enjoys immensely, a director and a trustee of Imam Hassan Center, and finally, inaugural president of the Australasian community from 2014 to 2020. He reflects that throughout his life, he believed in working hard professionally and representing his religion in the best possible way, and having benefited from the infrastructures put together by our Khoja forefathers, he tries his level best to contribute to its upkeep and enhancement. The final member of the panel we have is Alhaji Muhammad Jagani. He is a principal of an environmental engineering firm. He has undergraduate and graduate degrees in civil and environmental engineering from the University of Nairobi and the University of Toledo, and is a licensed professional engineer in Ontario, Ohio, and Michigan. Mohammedarif has been an active member of Islamic Shia Ithnashri Jamaat of Toronto. He has volunteered on the technical subcommittee overseeing redevelopment of the 9,000 Bathurst Street property since the mid-1990s. Since 1994, he has worked closely with various presidents and the EC working on key aspects of the project as it has evolved, such as infrastructure and municipal services, input to architectural program, design, budget, and schedule, as well as resolving traffic and cost-sharing issues with neighboring developers. In 2005 and 2006, he served as an elected member of the executive committee, providing support and advised to the President on the design and construction tender. Between 2008 and 2016, he served as a Secretary of the Capital Projects Development, working towards planning and operation of the new Jaffrey Village projects, including the community center and school, and thereafter on the master planning of the whole property for rezoning purposes. From 2017 through early 2019, he held office as Honorary Secretary of the our Jamaat in Toronto. Since September 2020, he has served as Secretary General of our regional body, NASIMCO. MashaAllah, all of you have a very expansive array of experience in community life and success in your career as well. As I've explained to you before the start of the program, the format of our conversation will be that there are questions that I will pose to everyone, and there are questions that I will ask one of you to answer, and others then can give their further reflection and allow an open discussion on the matter. Ultimately, the idea here is to be candid and honest with a view to moving our Khoja Shia Ishnashri communities and a wider Muslim community forward with unity and positivity, inshallah. So, having done this preamble, I want to begin by asking each of you to share with us what inspired and motivated you to become a regional federation leader or a councillor and serve the community. In doing so, can you please explain the demographics and size of your regional federation, how you see its purpose, and key milestones your regional federation has achieved in the last 10 years? I don't want you to be very detailed, just a brief, whatever you can remember. But the idea is what motivated you and inspired you to become what you became as a regional federation leader or a councillor. So could I start with, let's start with Saeeda Jiwa, and perhaps then I would ask Hussein, and then finally to Mohammedarif. So Saeeda, share your experience with us and try and explain to us what motivated you, and also inspire us and audiences that are going to hear you. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, September, for inviting me on this panel. So the first thing that comes to my mind, which has brought this inspiration, is in 1996, I went for Hajj. It was my first Hajj with European Council. And there we experienced when the men were, after Muzdalifah, they were to join us in Mina. We women all arrived in Mina. That time we had a group of women that Marhuma Zerabai Kaku had, I think she's quite well known in London. She was very well known in London, that she had a group of women with a different level of disabilities. So we had a group of those people, and we had, so we were all women with just one or two men with us who were not able to walk that distance. So we arrived early in the morning, and it was in April. I remember we left for the journey on the 16th of April, 1996. So it was around 20th or 22nd of April, really hot at that time. And when we arrived, we faced a huge crowd, and there were buses parked on the side, just kind of moving forward. It appeared that we were kind of involved in a stampede. And the men that were with us it was actually one man, wasn't able, his health wasn't very good, so he had an asthma attack. And this was my first Hajj. I've never experienced volunteering anywhere, because back when I did my secondary and primary and secondary in Islamabad, we had a very small community. We only had 3 families. So we only went to mosque for the 10 days of Muharram, that was it. all amals and everything were happening in the house with my mama's family, and there was one more family from Mombasa. So it was a very small community. Never attended madrasa, never had that kind of experience. So for me to be, taking any lead was not in my nature, or I never had experienced. So when I saw that, I felt that somebody needs to do something. And I went to that, it was one of our group leader. I went to him and I said, what do you want us to do? Because there were women who were being crushed against the buses. So he said, just leave everything and run for your life. Just save yourself, because it's really bad. So that man's daughter was there with him. And I said, look, you just look after your dad. And I knew 2 or 3 ladies that were from my town, Peterborough. And I said, okay, let's open up the medicine boxes, because we had the medicine boxes with us. And I said, just take all the glucose medicine, all those kind of things that we needed, vitamins and those kind of things. So we grabbed it, filled in our pockets, and we left all the medicine, just abandoned it. And we tried to protect our women. Some were fainting, some was almost near to death kind of, situation. So we went and asked for water. Nobody would give us water. Then there was a group of Chinese, who were there, and they gave us a bottle of water, and then they gave us kind of arak. So we tried to help our women, and so after doing all that, we were managed to put them on one side. By that time, our men marched they had arrived, and alhamdulillah, we were all saved. Nothing happened. Just one person was very, very ill, the person who was almost near to death kind of period. So that happened, and I just felt that adrenaline just made me do and commanded the women to say, you don't need to fall, you need to just take your strength, get your strength, and try and help. So that was, for me, that was an initiative for me to see, I never experienced this, but I think I can do something. Anyway, we came back home, and there was a meeting, and I was approached to join our jamaat and be a vice chair lady. So that was the inception of my
Right.
journey.
That's very, very inspiring story. But Saeeda Bhai, then obviously we know that you then move forward to become to the leadership position. So can you talk about something like something about the regional federation that you represented?
Yeah.
Something, the demographics of it, and the key milestone that occurred at Council of Urban Jamaats. Very briefly, if
Sure.
because I've got quite a few questions to
So
go
from
through.
my Jamaat involvement, I represented in '96 ladies sports tournament, which was headed by 2 of our sports heads. And I was asked to go and present in the COEJ meeting. That was the first ladies tournament in 1996. So I went along with my with one of the Shia sports head, and I presented. When I went there, I felt very, very awkward. And I counted, there were 57 men, and I was the only woman. I and my colleague was the only women there. And then there was a slot where Ummi Bai came, and she gave her report, and then it was left. So I was very surprised that I didn't know the makeup of this region. I didn't know that, this body exists in this way, and we had to go, because this was the first tournament that happened in Peterborough. We went and we presented that, and from then on it kind of continued. So for me, it was like, okay, I attended 2-3 years, but then in around 99 or 2000, I felt after doing my cheerleading role in the Jamaat and promoting what I needed, I felt was needed. I felt that there is a gap. So I wrote to the president of COEJ. I think it was Jafar Baidaramsi at that time. And I wrote and I said that I want to participate in this, in the regional federation. And I want to serve. And I feel that there is a gap for women and I want to head a women's board. And he spoke to me over the phone, interviewed me, and he said, yeah, go ahead. And, you know, I presented what I wanted to do, and that's how I entered COEJ.
Would you say that that's the milestone for women, your entrance into the COEJ, would you say?
I don't want to take credit for that, but I know Bai was already attending. But when I found out the role of what she was doing, it was limited to maybe London, I felt. Okay. So I wanted to represent women globally. Now,
okay, no, that's fine. I mean, what I was getting at was, I just wanted sort of an overview of the regional federation, how many members you have, and what's the population like. So, would you say that there are about 14 members in your regional federation? Jamaat
members, Jamaat, including the European Jamaat, I am not 100% sure. Between 14
around
and 16.
14, yeah, okay. Around sure that, yeah. And how many, so what's the individual heads in the regional federation? Around what, 10,000, 15,000?
Yeah, 15,000. I mean, now it is.
Do you have a proper statistics, do you think, at the?
No, there isn't. But I think the Jamaat can give you a rough figure because they pay membership and it depends on that. Right, yeah. But there is no set kind of, you know. But now, this is an approximate 15,000. Yeah.
In fact, Saeeda Bhai, we'll come to the issue of women, and I think you can expand on it later on. But thank you very much for giving us what motivated you into the community work in a very sudden way during a time where you were in Hajj. Thank you. So now we'll go to Hussein. Hussein Bhai, perhaps you can share, just like Saeeda Bhai, your experiences, what motivated you, and give us some sort of demographics on your regional and some milestone if you have any.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, like probably amongst many, I'm probably one of those who benefited quite a bit from the infrastructure that has been put together by the World Federation, by the regional federations in my childhood, all the way to education, you know, the madrasa studies, the benefits from the library, the communal benefits. I was a huge beneficiary of all of those infrastructures that were put together. If anything, you know, since my childhood, I knew at some point in time that I need to contribute back to its upkeep, keeping up the infrastructure, making sure that we're continuously enhancing it. As a beneficiary, the only motivation I have is that we leave behind infrastructures that are better, if not better, equal to what we have benefited from. And that's really, you know, for example, you know, during my days in Dar es Salaam, the madrasa was a huge infrastructure. We were going to madrasa every single day of the week. We had some amazing teachers, Shabir Datu and everyone else. So, you know, they taught me what is Islam today. And my objective is to make sure that I pass it on. And hence my focus around madrasa and the enhancement and the support of youths and children. So to me, the motivation, wherever I can contribute, I would like to keep up the infrastructure and the good work that our forefathers have done. That's really my motivation. It doesn't matter in whichever capacity that may be, whether it's madrasa, whether it is at the centers, or whether it is at the federation, in whatever capacity. My hope and motivation is that we continue to contribute to the infrastructures that have been benefiting us. In terms of the Federation of Australasian Communities, I was the inaugural president. We in Australia, you know, the Khoja community is small, but a very, very strong community that have really progressed our religion in Australia. So, wherever Khojas are, we tend to be leaders. And so we were as well in Australia. In fact, the ones who always did this for many, many years. So at one point in time, we needed to form a federation, and I was suggested that I should become the president. The good thing about the young federation and a very new federation is you get to start with a clean piece of paper. The challenge is that you're starting with a clean piece of paper. So you are starting to write down, what are we supposed to be? I mean, what's the purpose of the federation? Why are we here? What's missing? What am I supposed to contribute? What should we be doing together? So we started really working through all of those right from the ground up. So that was very, very interesting. I had a lot of support from the likes of Abbas Ali and Shabir Alidina and so many others that are in the community. In terms of the centers, we were largely at 3 to 4 centers. We have obviously the Imam Hassan Center, we have Al-Asr Center in Melbourne, and then we also had a Khoja Shia Nashri Jamaat of Melbourne as well, as a center. So, our centers are not Khoja 100%. We have a lot of other community members that come to it. So there are all of these challenges around that. If we were to promote World Federation with so many promotions that we get from World Federations, it has a lot of Khoja in it. And then the community members are reading what is on the notice board that is all Pakistanis and Indians, and then they're reading everything about Khoja. In fact, I remember one day we were advertising the famous sponsorship of Khoja Women for Studies. Innocently we put it up. But that obviously the community is much broader than just Khoja. So those are the challenges that we face in Australia. I do believe that our federation will continue to get stronger and stronger as we continue to invest in it. We've had a very humble beginning, and I believe that we will get stronger. In terms of the achievements, I remember quite clearly how our federation, our centers got together for the Yemen funding. I remember we raised a lot of money, and I think Saeeda Jiwa, you were there. I think it was in the Pakistan Executive Councillors meeting where we presented a very significant check from the Federation of Australasian Community. We raised, if I'm not mistaken, about $400,000 for the Yemen project at the time. I think that if you wanted to see the strength of FEC, you need to look at how generous the communities are in Australia. Now, to be honest, I think we're lucky. We've got the means. We've got, so we should be really donating, and we always step up to do that. So I think that was one of our really cornerstone achievements, not from me, but from many of the centers that are part of Federation. The other one, and one that I really wanted to see get through, was the Madrasa syllabus, the Center of Excellence. Across all our centers now, we use that Madrasa Center of Excellence syllabus, and also the portal that's been built is also built from a center in Australia. So that will be some of the achievements. But I'm sure more is to come.
Thank you for that overview of your region. Now we go to Mohammedarif. Please share with us your motivation and inspiration to serve the community in North America, and just give us briefly the overview of NASIMCO, if you can. Thank you, Mohammed. Please.
Okay, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Where should I begin? I originally used to work as a volunteer on an ad hoc basis with the madrasa back in Mombasa, and I used to be there early on as a student. But in North America, I'd stayed away from community, focusing mostly on my education and career more than anything else, until the purchase of the 9,000 Bathurst property came into focus in the early 90s. At that time, there was a small committee of 3 individuals. Essentially, I think it was Latif Fazil, Nashi Habib, and Maroon Sultan Dawdani, who had undertaken to purchase this property. It was quite an undertaking at the time because nobody had bought a property for worth about $2 million. And so they needed to do some due diligence on it before. And they brought us in. We were an environmental firm at the time, budding, and we were trying to help the community. So we went through the due diligence and we did an asbestos survey of the building, and we provided them with a report and everything. And then at the end of it, I decided that our company would not charge them anything. So we just said, this is pro bono, and here we go. And so at that point, then they said, well, look, you're not going to stop here. We're going to engage you and bring you further and make sure that you continue to work. And I said, okay. So this community work I found to be like honey, you can't get enough of it. I mean, you start to get into it and it just engages and pulls you into it. So, I started doing on the small side, part of the PDM committee that said, look, there is an infrastructure thing coming up where the government has the right to put a road through our property, and we want you to fight that, and get together with the developers and see what you can do. And so I started working with that, and then with various presidents, it went right through the development of the whole thing. And as you know, that what Mullah Asghar used to say is like, if you've done something for the community, and then if you're given the chance to serve again, when you serve again, you can understand that what you have done already in the past has been accepted. So it's like it keeps you hooked on, like on a treadmill, essentially. So that's how it works. So alhamdulillah, I've been progressing over time, and given my 2 cents worth in terms of the zakat of our time, essentially, if you can't contribute monetarily all the time, but the zakat is something built into it. That's what we do. Now, as far as NASIMCO goes, I was tapped into this position by Habib Megji, who was the president of Toronto. I mean, he had me work as a secretary under him, and he realized that I had that talent to manage things. So he said, why don't you, they're looking for a secretary general position to fill. And so they brought me in last year, and so I've been working. And NASIMCO is right now comprised of about 25 to 28 member federations or member jamaats under the federation itself. I think the membership in total is in the order of 20 to 30,000. And it's evolved. We just celebrated the 41st anniversary of NASIMCO. Now, obviously, it's gone through lots of transformations, and it's got a lot of learning and things that are going on. I mean, it was an organization that was trying to foster, promote Islamic and religious values, tabligh, madrasa, deriving from the World Federation infrastructure, as Saeeda mentioned. But it has achieved a lot over time. And it's also gone through a lot of transformation and a lot of challenges. There was a time when there was, this crisis that arose, out of well, I probably won't go into details about it, but that there was a caretaker committee that had to take it back under Mr. Badatu. This is about 4 years ago, I believe. And then after that, there was a whole process of rebuilding and re-engaging and moving forward with it. So right now, alhamdulillah, we've achieved a lot. It's not just an organization where people used to go just to get the Kumsi Jaza for a project, to be funded or something. Right now, it's evolved into much more than that. There's initiatives for youths, for ladies, for leadership development, and it continues to evolve. And in terms of what Arif Jaxi and his team have done in terms of the globalization, the infrastructure, social media engagement with online programs, and trying to deliver all kinds of press releases, advocacy in terms of any kinds of Islamophobia issues, any of that kind of thing. So really, it is a very broad-based organization, and we are trying to revisit it again to see whether the constitution or the goals of that organization as they were set out are still being achieved, or is this requiring a rethink on our part. So we are going through a constitutional amendment right now, and we're trying to revisit that purpose of NASIMCO again, and trying to understand what is its relevance today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, all three of you, giving me and the audiences the overview of also your federation and also your motivation, which is obviously very important to understand your background. I want to now, I think, following on from what Mohammedarif was saying about the challenges that was encountered at the regional federation level, I now want to concentrate on the challenges facing the regional federation before I come to the World Federation aspect of it. I'm going to direct this to Mohammed Bhai now, because he brought up this subject. Historically, Mohammed Bhai, regional federations were formed on the basis of necessity and geography. Now, in the case of Africa Federation, it was prior to the World Federation, and as a means by which to harness resources, foster unity, and chart out a mutually beneficial vision for the African Khoja community. Whereas the other regional federations like COEJ, NASIMCO, and Australasia, which is the latest one, they were replicated the Africa Federation model without going through the gradual evolution that Africa Federation went through. You get my point there, Mohammed Bhai?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel that this imposition created tension between jamaats and regional federations? Let me give you an example. Take NASIMCO or COEJ. Australasia is the latest one, but take those two regional federations. Africa Federation went through a very gradual evolution into accepting that there's a need to share resources and all that. Whereas at the World Federation level, before COEJ was formed, the jamaats were indirectly related and directly connected to World Federation. But then somehow everyone felt that what Africa Federation has as a regional federation, you must form a regional federation and find your feet. This is without going through any evolution into it. Do you think that that has created a tension between, say, a big jamaat like Toronto and NASIMCO as a regional federation? And similarly, at COEJ level, a big jamaat like London, Hujjat Hydari, Paris, and the regional federation. When there's a tension, don't see eye to eye, there is an issue, and things don't work as well as it should. Just your thoughts, Mohammed Bhai Jafar, and then of course, Saeeda Bhai, if she wants to come in, yeah.
Well, it's a good question, and I would have to answer both yes and no.
That's fine. That's fine.
What it is, the way Toronto Jamaat actually has been, like the current administration especially, has been very supportive of NASIMCO, and they've provided us with, their platform, their infrastructure, the use of their offices, even the sharing of their resources, with the secretariat. And so we try to streamline the programs and work with them. They also have, for example, a way of automated tax receipts to be issued. That is a model that now we have adopted as well from them, because Muntazi Jafar, who works there, is also part-timing with us. So we sort of try to harmonize and work so that we don't duplicate these issues, and we're able to, to cocktail on them and work with them. In the past, obviously, there have been tensions. There have been a number of different presidents who have not seen eye to eye with what NASIMCO wants and what the Jamaats want. And sometimes there is a bit of a feeling that, you're treading on each other's toes, depending on what programs you're delivering. We could be doing a certain program for Muharram or for Ramadan. Like, for instance, we had the children's puppet show that was done. And, the Jamaats felt that they could have done, the job themselves, instead of having NASIMCO do it. But because we had a wider exposure and we had a larger membership base, we felt that our program was better, that it would be more tuned by North America wide, as opposed to just 2 or 3 Jamaats looking at it from that perspective. So, there was obviously there's no right or wrong answer here, but sometimes we have to be very careful how we plan out and fund and initiate these programs, because otherwise we will be stepping on each other's toes and we duplicate the efforts and things like that. So there's obviously that kind of a tension relationship that can arise, and you have to be very careful and very diplomatic in how you handle these things.
So, Mohammed Jafar, there is a view amongst the grassroots. Is there really a need for regional federation, especially in the light of, say, COVID, where people can organize their own programs and connect with each other independent of institutions? If I were to say to you, there is no need for regional federations to connect people, and in fact, larger jamaats could take care of small jamaats themselves. Why should a strata like regional federation exist in today's time? I mean, give me a one cogent argument, if you can, for the need for regional federation.
Well, I mean,
I know I'm putting you on the spot, Mohammed, but try your best.
Well, let me go back to what you mentioned about the fact that Africa Federation evolved before the World Federation did. And so when World Federation came on board, or at least when Mullah Asghar took the vision forward and created the World Federation, the main thing to understand there was that he understood as well is that, sometimes it's like the tail wagging the dog. Like you have an umbrella body that is formed after a grassroots body is formed. So there's obviously some legacy with the grassroots body. There is some grandfathering of their values and certain things that are there. And when this new body comes on, there's obviously a little bit of a pushback, and people will start to wonder, is there a relevance of this body at all? But we have found over time that the World Federation has done so much and has been able to achieve by leveraging the other organizations and working with them as opposed to dictating to them. In the same way, what we have tried to do at NASIMCO as well is not to adopt this dictatorial kind of a position, but rather to see if we can leverage the talents and the resources and the experiences of all these other jamaats and see how they can be shared amongst the other jamaats. It's not just like one jamaat looking after another, because if Toronto is working with, for instance, Hamilton or Kitchener, I mean, these are like small towns which are just within 2 or 3 hours of Toronto. But if you're looking at bodies on the west coast of Canada or California or Florida, for instance, now, it's not very likely that Toronto is going to liaison with people down south and provide their talents and spread them around as effectively. So what we need is, we found that a body like NASIMCO really can harmonize and can galvanize all these talents and bring things together, their experiences in the US, in Canada, and how they can be, regionally, distributed. So, for instance, insurance is one thing, liability insurance, just the health insurance programs or the HR programs, any of those things. Like, we know that at the Jamaat level they're effective, but can we find a service provider that, because of our strength in numbers, that we can leverage and provide a greater global efficiency in terms of cost, Canada-wide or US-wide? So see, those are the things that we're trying to bring on after we revisit our mission and we figure out what needs to be done here. So I think there is a certain relevance to it, and we're still trying to, let's say, to enshrine it in a constitution as we remake it. But we've seen from experiences that there are efficiencies and there are a lot of experiences that can be shared and that really works.
Mohammed Bhai, I know I'm going to just pursue this a little bit more, because then I want Saeeda Bhai and Hussein to come in with their thought process here. You say Jamaats form part of the federation, but what role should regional federation play to Jamaats now? Often regional federations are formed for educational, legal, social, economic, and political institutions are set up there at the regional level to represent people's need and their rights. Yes. In our community, in the Khoja Shia Ishnashi community, the regional federations to me, seems to be more of a networking body rather than a representative one. Now, let me give you an example. If women are not represented in jamaats, who represents them at the jamaat, at the regional federation level? What happens if they are not getting, the women are not getting the fair opportunity to serve the community? Or an ordinary person is deprived of his rights at a jamaat level. Where can he go? Or even a scholar. If a scholar is unjustly deprived to share his knowledge at jamaat level, for example, he's banned, how can he or she achieve a fair hearing at a regional level for his views? You know, I suppose the fundamental question I'm asking all three of you in a way is, do you feel the regional federation should take a leading role in representing the cross-section of our community members, or should they just left it to Jamaat and you just behave like a networking, facilitating and all that sort of thing? Real representation, would we achieve that? I wonder. I mean, I know it's a progress in working and working on, what do you call it? Work on progress, working on progress. Is that a correct expression? But in any case, you see the gist of where I'm getting to.
Absolutely.
Let Mohammedarif, if you like, I can ask Hussein or Saeeda Jiwa to come in,
Sure.
and then you can come in right at the end if you like.
No problem. Go
All
ahead.
right, Saeeda Jiwa, you've seen our conversation between myself and Mohammedarif. Do you have anything to put from your point of view, or add, or make any clarification or anything like that?
No, indeed, definitely. I think I echo a few of the suggestion and thoughts that Mohammed Bhai presented. The benefits of having the umbrella body. So I think we are as jamaats, we are getting stronger and we're moving forward as opposed to what we were 10 years ago. So but there are still smaller jamaats who is in need of that support. And sometimes if we are leaving to a bigger jamaat to support the smaller jamaat, they may be deprived of that because the bigger jamaat has their own needs and they might want to focus on developing themselves. They may be able to share best practices. But in my experience, when I was leading as the head of Khawateen, I clearly experienced that some jamaats very isolated. There was no direct communication between the regional and the jamaat. So even if the messages were sent, emails, I had to repeatedly, I don't know where was the breakdown, but the secretariat would not continue to forward those messages to the jamaat. Now, I'm not saying that there is, it may be that they may not have the mail list, but communication had broken down and I had to repeatedly, through my kind of links, would send it to either the women's chair lady and so on, and then it would go or directly to the secretariat. So that's part of the one side of the importance of having a regional federation. The question you're asking about the level of representation, and I clearly agree with you. I felt that within my role, when I was as a Jamaat chair lady, I was very limited. Now, if I want to spread it outwards, even if I talk to my neighboring Jamaat, it was not easy to resolve or to replicate certain changes that I've made in my Jamaat, that I was allowed to. I was supported by our, president, and so I was allowed to do that. I felt that my neighboring Jamaat has not had the opportunity. So when I stepped into regional body, I wanted that to happen. I wanted the empowerment for women, for inclusiveness of other less fortunate and vulnerable members of our Jamaat to be acknowledged and heard. And I feel that regional federation has a bigger role to play, just like hopefully will come into the World Federation, because now a lot of our local Jamaats have the talents, they have learned how to develop themselves, they've probably had a lot of support regionally, nationally, and they are developing their own, system and programs and processes and so on. And they are able to assist other smaller Jamaats. So in addition to helping and supporting smaller jamaats, I feel that regional federation has a bigger role to play, like the empowerment, like the representation of youths and women, our seniors. They need to make strategies. They are there to be voicing. So just one example around, if there are political issues, there is COVID that we had experienced, there's Islamophobia that we experienced. Now, as a Jamaat individual going to raise their voice is not as strong as having a body like MCB. So in the UK, we have Muslim Council of Britain. That is a huge voice of all Muslims. But are we part of that? So we would like to be joining, to be either, or we should be represented as COEJ and have our voice, because there are certain elements that affects us. So I think there's definitely a need for regional umbrella body, but it's about how we review and evaluate ourselves.
If I can come in, you see, my point is that representing the voice of Khoja community within a different umbrella, that I can understand, but the grassroots do not have a good connection with regional federation. They have very good connection with jamaats. They don't have, so the grassroots feel, what is the role for, what role the regional federation is performing for a grassroots? If they have issues of their own rights, individual rights, which are not represented at the jamaat level in any way, where else can they go? They can only appeal to a higher body, but regional do not have any facilities to accommodate that, because they are bound to what jamaat tells them. Now, can you see that then what happens is that the relationship becomes very strong of a grassroots with jamaat and not with regional or world, because that grassroots rights and responsibilities and their understanding and needs are not catered for beyond the jamaat, if you see what I mean, and they just get, their connection is then with just jamaats. So I was alluding to that where is the for example, in your case, do you see that the needs of women are catered for effectively, given the discrepancies that exist in jamaat, regional federation as their membership status, lack of leadership at highest position for women? What do you think? I mean, do you feel that regional federation can play an effective role in bringing the women issues forward? What's your view here?
Sorry, you were frozen, September, so I just missed that question.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was saying that, look, in your case, the needs for women, are they catered for effectively, given the discrepancies that exist in jamaats, regional federation, as to their membership status, as well as lack of women leaders, many at regional level, including jamaat level? What do you think? Do you think that there will be changes for the better, and how can a world and regional federation play a more effective role, rather than just mentioning it that the jamaats needs to do more? Should it have a representative clout? That's what I'm saying.
September, you are very right. And even though as a regional body, we bring about the changes. So as you may be aware that the inclusiveness of women developed, evolved, and the Women Councillor position was created. I think what the difficulty was, and I felt that there's a huge challenge here, that even at the regional level, if you're bringing about the change, you want to emulate it to the regions. Now, the regions, sorry, not regions, the jamaats. So I had to personally speak to individual jamaat president, what are you doing for your women? Because I'm here advocating, what changes are you? We have made changes here in our constitution, in the regional. Now, what are you doing? So I felt there were some tokenistic responses, but not real changes in their constitution. So there is a huge challenge there. And I think we need to bring about, I don't know how, but the understanding of, if there is some kind of standardization at the regional level, and I'm not saying all constitutions should be the same, but I feel that there should be acceptance from the Jamaat that this is the way forward and we need to adapt. And in a very similar way, I think, when I represented World Federation, and we came up with an action plan for women, globally, each region had a different task to develop, to take to their Jamaat. So I had appointed representative from each region, and they went and they delivered that. Now, the good thing happened, and this is how we need to work on. The good thing happened that when the representative from North America, when she took the action plan, because we worked as a team, when she took the action plan of all women should be given the rights to vote, she took to the NASIMCO meeting and it was endorsed. Now, when that was endorsed, all Jamaat had to follow the rule. Now, I'm not saying the constitution was changed straight away. Those Jamaat who were due to review their constitution, so a time scale was given within 2 years or something like that. And they all followed that. And I think there should be that kind of work done with the Jamaats around how do we move forward. I felt that that was more effective in North America than it was in COEJ. In COEJ, even up to now, my Jamaat had not been, quite a few Jamaats are not even giving rights to women, and you have to pay your membership, and you have to. So what's happening already? You have got a vulnerable group. And if that vulnerable group, and I'm just coming to my social work side of it, if that vulnerable group, and being women, they want to be a member, and you have to pay 100 or 200 pounds to be a member, your husband or your family or your in-laws will say, and that will stop her from voicing. So she can't vote for her president, she can't vote for her regional president, because there's a stigma attached. If we standardize and say all Jamaat membership will be family membership, regardless, a husband and wife has to.
I fully concur. We accept that there are challenges, and we accept that. And I think you have beautifully explained it. But can you say at a Jamaat and regional level, and particularly at a regional level, if these things are identified, but then not represented through and not carried out, because Jamaats may not accept it, then we don't have any avenues to move forward. So this is where I was getting at, that do we need to now look at regional federation way of working with Jamaat, maybe in the light of the experience that we've had, and make the regional federation perhaps more effective functionally, and just based on just geography, and just that's how the regional is, and we have to accept it, but now come to actually functionality of it and make it more effective. I was getting to that. Can we thank you, Saeeda Bhai. I have to go now to Hussein. Hussein Bhai, Tamaru su view che amma, how do you say, you've seen how passionate Saeeda Bhai talked about the women issue there, and how do you see sort of the overall, what's your input in the conversation we've had just now between myself, Muhammad Bhai, and Saeeda Bhai?
I think what the concept of regional federation and world federation, there are quite a number of analogies of this structure in the corporate world, right? So you take example of any professional services firm like Deloitte or KPMG or PwC. About 10, 15 years ago, the world was a lot more bigger because we were not as connected as we are today, right? So the very famous word of the world is getting smaller, resources are getting limited as we go ahead. The concept is that we absolutely have to embrace globalization, right? So that's in my opinion, we need to, because of the limited resources we have to globalize, considering our directionally similar objectives we have as Khoja community across the world. We have to do a lot more with the same level of resources, and the only way to do that is to globalize. So the whole concept of globalization is really important. You look at what the big four firms have done, they've all regionalized and then they've kind of globalized, right? So for example, my role is an Asia Pacific role. I look after all of the countries from India all the way to New Zealand, right? So that's a regional role, no different to the regional federations. So the issue of regional and and global, World Federation and Regional Federation, that is a necessity at this point in time, considering the globalization of our communities, right? We have social media that actually connects anyone in Tonga all the way to New York as if they were just around the corner. The virtual reality that we're living in, it means that all borders have been broken away. So the concept of globalization, that is the only way for us to progress as a community, to do more with the very little resources or the same level of resources. The question is what is the role of the Regional Federation and what is the role of the World Federation? So I'll give you the analogy, right? So when you globalize, you go like that. You don't go like that, right? So what I mean by that is that, you don't duplicate your responsibility. The grassroots responsibilities with the Jamaat. The Regional Federation, if they were to start taking the same responsibility of the grassroots, you're now starting to go actually the anti-globalization. So I'll give you another example. As you go up, the executive councils group increase. And you know what happens when you have a body of 80 councillors deciding on which madrasa syllabus we want to adopt, right? Which malim we want to authorize and which we don't want, right? So when you go globalization, you go that. You don't go that, right? So to me, I think the first question we need to ask is, as we globalize, right, what remains and not duplicated at the Jamaat level? What is then assumed as the responsibility of the Regional Federation, not duplicating what the Jamaats are doing? And then what is World Federation doing that is not duplicating what the federations are doing? And the reason we do that is because the more you go high, you don't take more responsibility, you take less responsibility, but only the responsibility that the others can't see or they don't see the opportunity. So to me, I think the globalization is an absolute necessity at this time. The question is, have we just added rather than really carefully selected what stays at the... So for example, we say, what is the regional's responsibility to the grassroots? I would say none, because that continues to stay at the Jamaat level. The Regional Federation should be responsible of things and opportunity and challenges that the Jamaat cannot see. But the Jamaat is absolutely, absolutely good at managing grassroots. Why are we talking about grassroots at the Federation? But again, this is my personal view, right? So I think that we need to sit back and say, the World Federation 30 years ago and the federations now, what is it that we can help each other? Let things run at the Jamaat level, then let's go to the Federation. When you're building an ice cream, you have the ice cream at the bottom, you have the cone at the bottom, which is the Jamaat, and then you have the bit at the top, which is the ice cream, which is the Regional Federation, and then you have the cherry on the top, right? So it is smaller and smaller as you go up. It's not like, you don't add. And that's why, when I attended the first councillor, there was 80 people. There is no way you're going to decide on something. You're going to be agile with 80 councillors. So I think that there is a lot of analogy of globalization. Globalization is important. There's a lot of corporate analogy of how that's been done better. We need to go back to the whiteboards and say, okay, what is the role of the Jamaat that they do best? This concept, we need to introduce the concept of connected plus autonomy. What are the things on which we should be connecting? And what are the things that we should have autonomy? And I think the balance between autonomy and connectedness is where the success will lie in us going forward.
No, I think that that's a very good analysis, and I can understand now the functionality of a Jamaat and Regional Federation and World Federation can become more effective if we understand what is at a base and then what cannot be done there, and then there. But that analysis have to be very thorough in the light of all the experiences we've gone through in the last 20, 25 years. And we have to learn from where we have lacked. Mohammedarif, do you want to add anything? Because I want to now go on to World Federation.
Okay, just a couple of minor comments here.
Okay.
From what Hussein
So you
Bhai
heard
is saying.
Saeeda Bhai's position and also
Yes.
Hussein Bhai's. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so just building on what Hussein Bhai was mentioning, actually, I tend to agree with that analogy that he mentioned, that it really has to go down in a pyramid formation. But one thing we should not forget is that the grassroots, again, they do feel detached. And so they need sometimes to have a greater voice to speak for them. And so we do get the odd email all the time from grassroots directly saying, can you help me with this? Or I'm facing this problem with the Jamaat. Can you intervene and do something? Now, obviously, we are not a judicial body that can dictate terms to a Jamaat or anything, but on an informal level, like we can just reach out to the leaders and say, look, this gentleman has approached me or has phoned me or has emailed me, and this seems to be his problem. Is that something that you can handle at the Jamaat level, or do you need some assistance from NASIMCO to do that? And, so we sort of have a bit of a dialogue with them. But at the end of the day, it does remain with the Jamaat for the most part. And we do sometimes also get appeals from people in other parts of the world who may want, like, let's say an Iranian student might call us and say, I have a place in a certain university in the US. Can you fund this for me? Or is there a way that you can help us out? Now, we say that you're coming from a different part of the world geographically. You don't fall under our federation. So you have to refer to the federation for that area, maybe COEJ or, Africa Federation, or whichever is the nearest for you. But again, it's not our responsibility, but we try to guide them if we can, and, so that they're not totally disconnected from us. Similarly, like if they need COVID assistance or something like that, we do have the resources. We can provide that, from our end. So to the grassroots, like if there's groups that come and approach us, not individuals, but groups might come forward and say that, look, there's a certain organization here that's catering to, this segment of the population, and they need this. Can you provide us with masks or PPE or something? And then we would say, all right, we have a budget, we will allocate accordingly. And again, we make sure that we don't tread on the Jamaat's toes in that regard. So
You see,
it's like a little bit of a
absolutely. I understand. I understand that approach, and I think you made a very good point. Where, for example, a grassroots person approaching directly to regional federation because a relationship is irretrievably broken down with his own Jamaat, and he wants his position to be heard. And I don't think we have that process where Jamaat and the regional federation have agreed that when a relationship breaks down irretrievably, then there has to be a process beyond the Jamaat for grassroots to have their things heard. And I think that element of it can also assist the grassroots to understand that they've got a sense of ownership at a regional federation level. So as Hussein Bhai Hussein said, that we need to review where, for example, regional federation can represent things that Jamaats may not be able to, and help and assist its membership, Jamaat membership. I want to come to the World Federation aspect of it, because we've got limited time, and I've got this important discussion as well to be had. As a councillor of the World Federation, I'm addressing three of you, and then I'll pick one once I have identified the question correctly. How does your relationship work with the World Federation? As a councillor now, are you obligated to follow the community decisions of the World Federation, even if you disagree with them? What happens if their decisions are wrong? How do you sort of reconcile those things in your mind when you're a councillor? Who am I going to ask? Shall I start with Saeeda or Hussein Bhai Hussein? Who wants to come in? Hussein, you wants to come in, or Saeeda Bhai?
I don't mind.
Okay, Saeeda Bhai, you answer this one, and then I have a question for Hussein, because he was particularly involved with that. So let's start with you, and then I'll ask Hussein, and then I'll come to Arif after that. Yeah, okay. And then, of course, any one of you can join in after Saeeda has given an answer. Yeah. Go on, Saeeda. How do you see?
It's a
When
very
you are
interesting
conflicted,
question.
when you are conflicted, okay?
It's a very interesting question. And I think the first thing I would say that as an executive councillor, it is understood that you have the power and responsibility to be part of the decision making. And if majority goes one way, if you're not happy, I'm very happy to abstain or to, to air my view. So I think you need to be confident to be able to do that, because as a councillor, you have a responsibility. Unfortunately, if the majority voice is on one side, sometimes people just follow. And I think that is something that I feel that we as individual or having that leadership role, we are misusing that position by just following, and people do that. And I know sometimes you are either under pressure, obliged, or you don't want to be singled out. So I think there is a pressure, peer pressure, I would say, like we have peer pressure in all other avenues. I feel that there is, and we are human beings, but I think, and we do feel that social pressure, but I feel that given that kind of responsibility, we need to take the ownership. When it comes to the role of an executive councillor, in my experience, I have seen that decisions have been made or things have been discussed or brought without the executive council's knowledge. So I was very used to being an executive councillor in the COEJ, that if any decision were to be made, and it was some kind of emergency, if everybody can't get together, there would be an email sent and an agreed phone call where decisions or discussions would be held. So that I was very used to, that kind of role. And I thought I'm going to add value when I go into World Federation. Yes, I think as we all, we expose ourselves to challenges, we learn, we develop, and we, like Kusanbai said, we analyze and see, where things need to be changed. And I personally felt that my role as an executive councillor, I wasn't able to fulfill my responsibility and duties because I felt that I wasn't aware of certain things that were happening. Now I felt, is that normal? Should it be like that, or shouldn't? Whether the structure is being made like that. So I was kind of questioning myself that should it be like this or shouldn't be like that. I was very much used to being a councillor who was asking all the questions, and nothing would pass beyond, nothing would be presented without that prior discussion. But unfortunately, we had situations in the World Federation, and I'm equally party to that because I was a councillor and I should have raised it, but things had passed without prior discussion or knowledge. And I think that, for me, I think those kind of systems should not be, we should not go along with that. I think as a councillor, I'm responsible. Before, I think we were called as trustees, but I don't know if that is, trustees are only the office bearers. But I felt a lot of decisions were made at that level and then presented to the executive council. So I would clearly say that those things need to be looked at.
Thank you very much, Saeeda, for very candid expression of how you felt when you were a councillor at the World Federation level, and we take on board some of these things that needs to be looked at. I want to come to both Hussein Bhai and Arif, and Saeeda, you can also join in afterwards, because I think I'm combining a couple of questions here, and I'll address it to Hussein first, and then Mohammed Bhai, Arif can come in, and then you can come in afterwards if you want. Hussein Bhai, do you feel the World Federation uses a bottom-to-top approach where grassroots are the focal points, or is it more of a top-to-bottom approach? Saeeda Bhai just gave us a very good example of top to bottom approach, even at the executive level. How much impact does the regional federation play in the World Federation decision making? Now, I want to be much more specific here with you. A pertinent example is the recent controversy surrounding the presidential election of the World Federation in 2020. We know that there were disputes with the procedure of eligibility of candidates, and sadly, disputes and irregularities have continued to occur in the World Federation election process for over 20 years now. Some of you were involved in the PSS, where you found that it was unconstitutional for the original election to determine the results, and a new election should be held and correction of the process. However, it appears to many of the people who are observing the meeting that the PSS decision was ignored, although the body was created by the Executive Council. What is your view of the recent World Federation election, and how we as a community can be more transparent, fair, and constitutional? Now, I'm asking you not, I want to be candid and positive, looking forward to, but in the light of your own experience, and you were involved as a PSS chair. And after you have given your deliberation, I would like Mohammedarif to come in and reflect his points of view, and then Saeeda can come after that. So I want you to start, Hussein Bhai, how, what is your give us your reflection on what I've just said.
So I think we know the issues that we have seen in the World Federation is not new to whenever there is elections, right? In every country elections, in Australia, everywhere you go, you have these issues that come up with the elections, right? That's number one. So I don't necessarily think that what has happened in the last 12 months is any different to what happened in 2009, right? So you know, election issues do come up. That's the inherent risk in the concept of election, right? So we'll park that. Number two is the whole world was disrupted because of COVID. We really didn't know how to manage our executive councils and decisions in a COVID environment, right? So that's number two, right? Because you know, we could have resolved this issue a lot easier when we were in person, and that's how we have always, you know, our constitutional did not allow us to have some of those meetings that could have resolved some of these things. So that's number two. I think we were all learning how to manage in a world of COVID. The third one is, I don't think we had a situation where the World Federation was facing a legal suit ever. So we were still learning how all of that happens. What I would like, and I'll come back to the PSS, what I'd like to say is that we should never undermine what the World Federation has done over the last 30 years just because of what has happened in the last 12 months. We should never, ever undermine what the regional federation deliver just because of what has happened in the last 12 months, right? We have to be much bigger than the last 12 months. When you look at the situation of COVID, when you look at the situation of you know, the specific situation we had around the legal you know, situation, we we shouldn't ever discuss, you know, the whole benefit of World Federation and Regional Federation just because of the last 12 months. So that's, I'll park that for now. But what we should do is we should learn from the process, right? We should learn what is it that could have been done better, right? So does it really matter whether we meet in person or virtually? Probably does, probably doesn't, right? So all of those things we need to look at and review. Now, election issues come up everywhere, and where it has gone well and where it hasn't gone well, it comes down to leadership, right? My personal opinion in this whole situation is, I think that we could have been, I think it's a leadership issue over that situation, right? I think that in many ways, we wanted our leaders to step up, right? And take control of the matter, right? And I think that's where, in my opinion, I think we could do better in strengthening our leadership when crises happen. We all know that a leader is identified by the crisis they stand behind and they stand by, right? So to me, I think that, and I'm not talking about one leader, I'm talking about leadership in our community, right? So I think that it was a great test of leadership in our community, and I think we can learn from that process going forward.
Can you talk about the PSS? The reason why I want you to talk about PSS is because that body was created for a very specific remit by the Executive Council, which is the highest body representing in between the conferences, to represent the voice of the community. And it created this body, and then for a particular purpose. And PSS body, as I understand it, identified the relevant bits which mattered and for which the community should be and ought to be united, because there was a breach somewhere along the line. And somehow the PSS report hasn't been dealt with as it should have been, as I understand it. What is your view as a chairperson of the PSS? How did you see, and what should we learn from that?
Yeah, so I was requested to take on the chairmanship of the PSS body on the basis that I was physically and also from all of the very removed from everything else, right? So
you didn't carry your baggage.
Yeah, I was literally down under. I was literally down under. You know, very seriously. I was brought in with the view that I had less strings attached to a lot of things that was going on at the time, right? So the one thing we wanted to do in the PSS is that we wanted to absolutely make it, as an auditor background, I wanted to make sure that we only dealt with things that were factual, right? Where I can point to a particular paragraph in the Constitution, that I can point to a particular email, or I can point to a particular situation. So it had to be, even if it was not going to be very strong in its recommendation, it had to be strong in its factual accuracy, right? And I think that's what the PSS has lived up to. I believe the report has lived up to its challenges. I don't think anyone has ever disputed any of the facts that were put in the PSS. Now, there is a lot of argument around whether the elements that were in the PSS were material or not, right? I don't think any of the PSS members were there to decide what was material or what was not material. What we felt was that there were constitutional breaches, or there were factual elements that needed to be considered in light of the results of the election. The PSS report was going to be tabled at the Executive Councils, and that's what we did. Now I'll come back to the leadership, right? So to me, I think that the role of the PSS literally ended as soon as the report was presented, right? And then it was in the hands of the leaders who appointed us and who put us together to take it forward, right? And I think my point is not the PSS, not the report of the PSS, because that lived up to its factual accuracies. What the question is, the leadership of what happened after that. What did the World Federation do with that report? And I think that's a big question from a leadership perspective, right? So I think that, I think that we need to ask ourselves, you know, who was supposed to be taking that report, who was going to be doing something with that report, right? So, that's where I would leave it at.
Now, that's very interesting position that you arrived at, and really a lot of learning has to be done by the supreme body of our community, which represents the community voice at that level. That when you create something and the report is in front of you, we are obligated morally to look at it and take it forward, because ultimately it was a decision of the Executive Council to create this body for a specific purpose, and for which the PSS delivered. So there is a learning curve here, and particularly obviously the leadership has to make sure what it should and ought to do in these circumstances when it repeats itself. So we can't do anything now, but we can only learn from what happened, and as a result of our action, what we can do in the future in the light of the experience we've had in the past. So now, thank you very much.
I think one point,
please go.
I do want to say is that, you know, when you have the Jamaat, you have the Regional Federation and World Federation, right? In a corporate world, the last thing that one leader wants to do is to undermine another leader. When that happens, that is a start of a very, very nasty journey, right? And I have seen it happen in the corporate world, you know, where, you know, we start undermining ourselves, right, as leaders. And I think that one of the biggest lessons I will learn from this process is that I should never undermine, you know, my other fellow leaders, because once you start to do that, the power goes into the grassroots. Right? Leaders are put together to do a job, and have to allow them and respect them to apply decisions that is within their power.
That is why, Hussain, if you notice, I started the tension between a large Jamaats and a regional. And if we don't have that relationship sorted out within the regional federation level, then these tensions are going to occur repeatedly. I've seen in my own position as Secretary General of the World Federation when I was Secretary. And so we need to look at and really come to a very fundamental position, as you put it, that leadership are there to do a job together, not by undermining and moving as a separate agenda. So I think we learn a lot from this PSS report and what happens. And thank you very much for giving your experiences. So Mohammed Bhai, Hussain Bhai, do you want to add anything, or shall I go to Mohammed Bhai now? Okay, Mohammed Bhai, would you like to add anything to what Hussain and Saeeda Bhai has said so far?
Well, I'll just go back to your question as to what to do as councillors when you're at the World Federation and they come up with policies that you are at odds with. And sometimes you have to recognize that there's a larger or greater good to be served. And so sometimes, even though you may not agree with a certain decision, that you just have to go along with the vote. Now, sometimes some people, like there's some wise leaders of the community who have written to us and said, this whole voting process that was there was flawed because at the end of the day, there was issues that the PSS report had raised, which were constitutionally, or the World Federation elections were not in accordance with the law, or the letter of the law, let's say, or the Constitution. However, if we look at the fact that Saeeda had a lot of the majority behind him, and even if the elections were reheld again, the outcome would not change. The only thing that we were not very happy with was that by not going to fresh elections, that we still gave the litigant the right to continue with his litigation, which you can still see that it's still active. And that flame would have been extinguished if he had gone back and revisited, even if it would have cost us a little more money and more time. But if we had done the elections or re-elections again in the right way, then things would have been greater. And sometimes it's like you're voting, it's daytime and you're saying it's night, and the members come back and all vote that it's night, but you can see the sun is shining out there as the day. So but at the same time you have to look at the greater good. Like putting Saktabai back in power, I think was the right thing to do there because everybody wanted it and everybody wants to move on, and rather than look behind in the rearview mirror, just want to look forward and see what we can do here. So sometimes it serves a greater good not to oppose the decision of the majority and just go ahead with it. But you voice your concerns anyway, so like we did at the Federation conference. So this is how you do it.
No, Mohammed Bhai, whilst I accept that unity is very important, but we have to also accept this fact that we are a rule-based community, and when there are breaches identified anywhere along the line, that the unity should also be for that one is united to make sure that those breaches should not and ought not to occur. But when it does occur repeatedly, then we have to ask our question, a very serious question, that how does a unity serve its purpose then? If we have made rules, then we must make sure that we abide by them. That is the functionality of a rule-based community. So whilst at 2009 we forgone we said, well, we'll unite, and we should have continued that process of making sure that elections are held according to what is decided. So by the way, I accept your position fully as well. As a small community, we also have to look at many other things. But one of the other things that we should seriously now look at the community moving forward is to make sure that when a body identifies breaches, that the body is united underneath that body that identified those breaches and to correct it. So unity has this dual thing, that if we are a rule-based community, we also have to make sure that balance have to be right. When to forego the breaches, but repeatedly foregoing the breaches is not doing anything good for the community. So we have to look at both the sides of the equation. So I accept, by the way, how you have put it, but at the same time, we have to also understand that if we are a constitutional body, then breaches do matter. Yeah. Okay. So, Saeeda Bhai, do you? Thanks, Mohammed Bhai, for that analysis. Saeeda Bhai, you have anything to add after you heard Mohammed Bhai Arif, and I don't know why I say Mohammed Bhai Jafar. Mohammed Bhai Arif.
Well, I'm not with him anymore.
And you are not, I know. And Hussain Bhai Hussain. Do you want to add anything, Saeeda Bhai?
Yes, I think I would like to add that it was, I think, two things. One, that Hussain Bhai said that when PSS report was presented, it was out of their hand. When he mentioned leadership, we as executive councillors are the leadership, not office bearers. We are the leadership. What did we do with that report? That's a question to me. Because we did not honor that. We appointed that team to deal with crisis, and then we disregarded. So as a councillor, I did not do my role in that particular situation. I think the other thing is that there were lots of issues that was brought up regionally, and that could be some biases or whatever, and it was very clear that there were some biases. But what has happened is that the question started rising on the PSS leadership from the regions, that they should have consulted their 30 or 80 councillors. And I think it has to be made very clear that when the President of World Federation makes a decision, He will not go to the voters, the grassroots, to go and ask everyone that we have already appointed a leader. We have given our faith into them. We have appointed. So I think the question, and probably needs to be revisited when whoever is making the new policies or revamping it, to make it very clear that in future, if PSS is making, these are the regional presidents and the president of the World Federation. These are our leaders that we have voted for. Why would they have to go and ask individually to their 80 councillors or 40 councillors or 30 councillors and get views, whatever the reason? They should be independently putting their heads together. They are leaders, we should honor them and we should be able to. So today, probably from what Hussein Bhai said, we learn, but we need to rectify and we need to make it very clear that in future, when these people are going to make decisions, this body, when they're going to be when they will be making future decisions, then what will be the remit and who are they responsible to and who will be questioning. And I think once we clear that, because this was the first time this body has been formed. So there are lots of unclear rules around that. In my head, it was very clear. These are the heads and they will make a decision. They put themselves together and they worked independently. But clearly that wasn't clear from the region's point. And a lot of our PSS leadership had to withdraw, which is very sad. That it is undermining their own leadership, kind of credibility. So if we are undermining our representative who is presenting in World Federation, then what does it say about those regions? And I think that is something we need to be mindful.
No, thank you very much, Saeeda Bhai, for that reflection, because it also gives a very interesting perspective of the authority of the Executive Council. And I think that what comes out from this discussion is that the Executive Council should rein back, should take back its authority, the rightful authority under the Constitution, and make sure that the decisions are made at the Executive Council level and they are properly deliberated, and the councillors must be involved. And whatever is decided by the Executive Council should then be revisited and made sure that whatever its purpose was, that it is fulfilled, rather than negated in a way the PSS report, I suppose, was negated and wasn't sort of carried out to its full deliberation and outcome. So I think what comes out is that Executive Council needs to now take its rightful authority under the Constitution. And that is an important outcome of this little deliberation that we had. I want to now move on to, I think you must all be tired. It's now coming to 2:45 UK time. I have a question, but I don't know, because that would take us another half an hour, I feel, because if I give three of you, it's a very interesting question, but I don't know whether I should pursue it. No, I think let's not eat for other time. Okay, I'm now going to ask you this question. How do you see the future of your regional federation? And what advice would you give to anyone that wants to serve the community as a councillor now, as a councillor at regional level and world level? So two things. How do you see the future of your regional federation? And I would like to also reflect on the future of the World Federation. And also, if anyone wants to become a councillor, what advice would you give? Let me start with Hussein and then Saeeda Bhai. Oh no, I'll start with Saeeda Bhai, Muhammad Bhai, and then Hussein as a last speaker. So can you be brief, but not too brief, but brief enough, okay? Saeeda Bhai. So two questions. One is, how do you see future of the regional federation and World Federation? You can combine it. And what advice would you give?
Okay. I think there needs to be, for regional federation, I concur and echo what has been said in this discussion around not duplicating anything. I think it is very important that networking remains, that the region should be seen as an umbrella body to be able to reach out where the jamaats are not able to, and support and promote the values of our community and our religion in a kind of an area where regions can't reach, the jamaats can't reach. So, and that needs to be reviewed, because we are evolving. Jamaats are becoming very they're strengthening their abilities. So it's about every 5 years we need to review what would be our remit. But I do feel that regional federation has a role to play. It's a voice of that particular region. And I think sometimes when there is a cutoff point for an individual with their jamaat, and they have that opening to go to a body where they are heard, because we can't just block an individual where their needs are. And equally with the jamaat, a lot of funding, and I'm just touching on some welfare issues, so financial situation and so on, it could be that leadership could assist with. And again, they should be looking at a bigger picture and not thinking small, and move away from the things that jamaat are able to do, and kind of, move forward. With regards to region and World Federation, I would say it is exactly the same. They need to mimic the same kind of strategy, whereas a World Federation should not get involved in any day-to-day running of the regions. If they are able to do it, we support them. So for example, I'll give an example of a census project, which I initiated as a councillor. And inshallah, hopefully that will continue. And that is something that we felt nothing has been happened over the years. And this is something we feel that if it is initiated by the World Federation with all the structure and strategies in place, then it can be passed down to the region to then encourage and promote it within their region. So then it continues as a system in place that you don't have to redo it all again. You can just continue to have it done every year, or biannually or whatever, and then you have those statistics of your community there. And for World Federation, I think we need to look 50 years ahead. We can't be bogged down with just simple things in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I think we have to see where we're heading with our community. Just an example, we all give example of Aga Khan and how they move on. We need to think about our where we are heading with our religious side of it, where we're heading financially, educationally. And I really feel that we should not miss out. And everybody that I've heard talks about education, health, and housing. What we forget is family. What I always feel, what is the purpose of building and educating when your family life is not what should be? And living in the West, and not only West, the reason I'm saying this is because of the outcome of the Women's Needs Assessment. I strongly feel that if we don't strengthen our family life, and this is coming from Mimbar and our leadership, promoting and making more inclusive of women, and getting an equal voice of all members of our community, we will progress.
Okay, how do you say, very briefly, what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a councillor then, particularly ladies?
I would say go for it. I went for it. I felt that I want to make a change. I wanted to make a change because I felt that I can. And I didn't wait for somebody to approach me. I wanted to serve, and I went. And there were lots of challenges for many years, but I felt I had a lot of support as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived in the 25 years. So, so we should continue.
We should, yeah, just go for it. Yeah, that's your advice. Okay. Muhammad Arif, how do you see the future of regional and the world, and what advice would you give?
Well, the regional federations have got to have like a very long-term vision. we have to recognize that the world is changing a lot. For instance, the regulations regarding money laundering, the taxation systems, the structures, infrastructures, funding, for instance, that there are groups out there that advocate for the fact that Islamic organizations are terrorists. And so, there is a very delicate balance here that we have to strive at as to how we come up with the infrastructure for channeling funds, for instance, or how we report things, to bodies like Canada Revenue Agency or the IRS in the US. So that's one aspect of it from the governance standpoint. There's other things that we have to look at, which the regional bodies are not quite equipped with. For instance, if somebody were to leave a legacy of some land or some property to NASIMCO, for instance, and in their will, how would that property be handled? Would it be a capital project? Would it be something that you can leverage off of? How you can develop it to generate income, or is it a foundation fund or something? So we have to go back to our grassroots and basics, and just revamp our raison d'etre. What is the organization's purpose? What are its objectives? What is it going to do in the future? How it's going to evolve and handle these kinds of challenges? And because right now we just don't have that infrastructure. The World Federation, channeled some funds to us, and then we work with that, and then they give us allocations of KUMS and Sam Imam and Sam Sadat and how and things have to be handled. So there is a very let's say informal kind of a structure that's set up as to how funds are transferred, what happens, how do you make allocations and things like that. But these are some of the issues that will come up when we try to revamp our constitution. We're going through this process, and we have to sort of take a rethink of our mission and what it takes to be there. Now, as far as volunteering goes, obviously I would approach this in the same spirit. Whether you're at the federal level or the federation level or at the jamaat level or even at the World Federation. But again, I go back to Hussein Bhai's analogy of the ice cream cone or the pyramid structure. And so just like you have to grow in the corporate world, you move on in steps. And so you're serving as a member of the jamaat, and then you're a volunteer, and then you become part of the EC and executive. And you might even move up there, but just like you become a secretary of the Jamaat, then you move up to the secretary of the Federation. You could become a secretary of the World Federation. So there is a bit of a progression there, and you give yourself a little bit of a ladder to climb on. And if you have that vision, that's how you do it, and that's how you approach it with the volunteer spirit.
Thank you very much for that advice. To anyone approaching to become a volunteer, Jamaat, regional, world. Last words go to Hussein Bhai. Hussein Bhai, share what's the future of the regional and world, and what advice would you give?
Yes, so I think I've always known Khoja as leaders. We will do great things, no matter the pressures. So I would say that I haven't seen a Khoja not make good of a crisis. We always make a lot of good from any crisis, and I think I know that in about 2 years or 3 years we'll be having this meeting again, and we're going to say, how good was that? I think that there is a lot of hope in everything that we can learn from this process. And I'm very confident that we're going to learn from this process. Because one thing we have to realize is that nobody wins in a crisis, and I don't think anyone enjoyed that, whichever the balance. The other thing that we also have to realize that everyone was fighting for a non-paid voluntary work. So the good thing is that there are so many leaders, but we don't have that many positions. So I think that's what defines Khoja. So I think I'm absolutely sure and confident that we're going to get a lot out of this. I do think that the pace of change in the world is a lot faster than what a lot of our structures and leadership and governance can catch up with. This is not only in the World Federation or the jamaats or the regional federation, this is in the corporate world as well. You will find that we are always lagging. Governance, leadership, structures will always lag the pace of change. So I think that we have to really look at ourselves and say that the World Federation 30 years ago, the World Federation today, how do we catch up with the change and pace of what's happening around us? So my sincere hope is that we learn from this process, and I think that we should really look at ourselves as to how we're going to have an impact with the less or equal amount of resources that we have. And I can tell you one thing is that the resources are only going to get scarce as we go forward into the future. So our effectiveness and our leadership needs to be even sharper going forward to make more out of the same level. And I'm sure that we have all the readers around us to do that.
And if somebody wants to be a councillor, what advice would you give? Or a volunteer?
It is the most privileged, it's the most privileged opportunity that you can ever get. You know,
so if you get an opportunity, you grab it.
I would anything to support the infrastructure that has been put together and I benefited from. I will make sure that we can upkeep it and enhance it. Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. I think all three of you really, I enjoyed the discussions, by the way, from three of you. That's very candid and constructive as well. Thank you all for participating in this panel discussion. As a moderator, I felt that this discussion took us beyond Jamaat and opened our mindset to what the challenges are at the federation level. What comes out from this panel discussion is also how tenuous the relationship can become between large Jamaats and the federation if they don't see eye to eye, if issues are not seen eye to eye. It appears from this discussion that future survival as socio-religious community depends on how well our structural hierarchy can be functionally made to serve the grassroots of our community in a way that they also feel that they have a sense of ownership at all levels, Jamaats, Regional Federation, and World Federation. So the role of the councillor and the Executive Council needs to be more proactive so as to give effects to its proper constitutional role and authority. In short, I feel the destiny of our federation depends on how its role is perceived and accepted at a very base level. If they don't have that sense, then I think there will be an issue continuously. So hopefully from this discussion, we're now more aware, as you all have now thrown very good light on what can be done. And now it is also up to the community and the leadership, present leadership, to assist in this process of effective development. There is also so much a community can do to make our institution ready to serve the community. So the community grassroots must also come forward and voice their concerns, and they must also actively participate at the community decision making level. So with all this, thank you very much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for participating and sharing your thoughts so candidly with us. I really enjoyed this very candid discussion about the Federation and how you see the future of it and all that. So thank you very much, and hopefully we will again meet, and this time round we may have some very specific areas of discussion rather than a very general area. So I hope that you will participate again in this forum. Thank you very much, Saeeda Bhai. Thank you very much, Hussein Bhai, and thank you very much, Muhammad Bhai, for spending your time. And I know, Muhammad Bhai Arif, it's a very early time for you. and Hussein Bhai very late, and me and Saeeda Bhai are okay. We're going for our lunch now. Thank you very much. I think Mohammed Bhai, you go for your breakfast now.
Yes, a full breakfast now.
Yeah, full breakfast. Why not? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz. Okay.